Hello everyone, this is Albert Seton. I've been privileged to be approached by Rabbi Zakin and asked to give some shiurim in halacha for his Torah library. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll have a few shiurim which will focus on the limud of the Bet Yosef. We'll begin with the Gemarot, we'll discuss the discussions in the Bet Yosef, we'll summarize the ideas, and we'll show how these ideas are presented in the Shulchan Aruch. Learning the Bet Yosef and understanding the Bet Yosef gives great clarity. We can understand how halakha is created and is structured, and it's very fundamental understanding for the halachot lemaaseh in the Sifrei HaAchronim. We won't focus that as much on the halakha lemaaseh aspect after the Shulchan Aruch and the Achronim. We'll focus on bringing the halachot from the sugyot through the Rishonim to the Psak in the Bet Yosef, and obviously we'll discuss all the concepts and ideas that are in the Bet Yosef. Without further ado, we'll begin with Hilchot Hanuka in Siman Taf Resh Ayin. As in every Siman, the Bet Yosef is always discussing the words of the Tur. Here the Tur brings the Gemara in Perek Bameh Madlikin, and he discusses Hanuka. He says, what is Hanuka? He brings the Braita and Masechet Shabbat that on Kafeh B'Kislev, there's 8 days of Hanuka, there's no Hesped, there's no Ta'anit. And he says that when the Ivanim went into the Hechal, the Timu, the Shemanim, Sheba Hechal, and the Jews were victorious, the Beit Hashmonai found only one Pach of Shemen that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, and it only had enough oil to light for one day, and there was a miracle, and it lit for 8 days. And therefore, the Chachamim made a takana that there should be 8 days of Hallel, of Hoda'ah, and we'll say the Hallel and Hoda'ah, and the Tur in a later Siman will discuss the Hallel and Hoda'ah. The Bet Yosef, as he does, the structure of the Bet Yosef is always to bring the source of the Tur and to discuss the words of the Tur. Can also become tameh. And therefore, what does it help us that the Kohen Gadol seals on the Pach Shemen? The Bet Yosef brings 2 answers from the Rishonim. Firstly, the Tosafot answers that the Kli was in a position that it was realized and obvious that it wasn't knocked over, and therefore the Kli was allowed to be used. The Ran brings a different answer, and he says that if they would have knocked it over, they would have broken it because they're always looking for jewels or something inside, and therefore when they saw the seal on it, they realized that for sure it must have not been knocked over. Interestingly enough, the Bet Yosef mentions that both of these explanations can be found in the words of Rashi in the Sugya. The Bet Yosef then asks another question, and he asks why they need so many days to get new oil, and he gives 2 answers that are well known. One is the answer of the Ran, that the Ran says that the Shemen Tahor is only found in the territory of Asher, which is 4 days mahalach, 4 days traveling from Jerusalem, and therefore they needed 8 days to go back and forth. Another answer that the Bet Yosef brings is that Am Yisrael was beheskat tmeim, and they needed 7 days to become pure and 1 day to crush the olives, and therefore they needed 8 days to get new olive oil. It's interesting to note that although the Bet Yosef is primarily a Sefer Halacha, when there are questions in concepts, he does make the point to clarify when needed. The next question is a question that many have probably heard, and it's usually mentioned in the name of the Bet Yosef. And if I'm staying corrected, I think he is the first one to ask this question. And he asks, why was the holiday established to be 8 days? Really, the holiday was a 7-day miracle because they had enough oil for the first day, and therefore it should have been a holiday of 7 days. So he gives 3 answers. There are other answers, but the Bet Yosef himself gives these 3 answers. The first answer given is that the oil was cut in and divided into 8 parts, and therefore every night there was a miracle as it lit for the entire night. The second answer given is that all of the oil was used on the first night, and nevertheless the flask from which the oil was poured did not finish, and therefore right away they noticed that there was a miracle on the first night. The third answer is that on the first night they filled up all of the cups of oil, and when they saw in the morning that the cups were full, they realized that there was a miracle on the first night. So all of these answers explain why even the first day had a miracle, and therefore the holiday was established for 8 days. Bezrat Hashem, we would like to make these shurim accessible for people, whether or not they have a Beit Yosef and a Torah in front of them, or whether they do not. And therefore, we'll explain the concepts outside, but everyone is welcome to open the Beit Yosef and read it inside and enjoy it for yourself. We'll now return to the Tur, who discusses Asiyat Melacha. The days of Hanuka are not like Chol HaMoed, that they have prohibition in Melacha, rather than Mutar in Melacha. However, women have a custom not to do Melacha while the candles are lit, and the Tur says the Lashon, Ve'en lehakel lahem. We should not be lenient with them if they want to sort of change from this custom. The Tur also brings that some places have a custom the entire day, and the Tur says that we shouldn't be lenient and we shouldn't allow them to do melacha. If they have this custom, they should continue in this custom, because the Tur brings a concept that we find in Masechet Pesachim, that when a place has a custom and they're stringent, even though from the letter of the law it's allowed, we're not allowed to permit them to do something, even though it's really allowed. And the concept is that there were noheg, that it's asur. Once they have a minhag that it's asur, maybe you need a beit din of greater stature to undo it. There's other reasons in Psahim that are brought down when you can abolish a custom like this. The Torah feels, though, that this custom should continue, and we should not be lenient on anyone who does melacha. It sounds like even for men, the Torah is talking about. The Beit Yosef brings the custom. He discusses the fact that why the women don't do melacha while the candles are lit, and he said that it should be so that there's a heker, that they should not use the light. I guess in the olden days, they didn't have electricity, and they used the candles, that are in the house, and for this reason, we want to show that there's a distinction between these candles and other candles, and therefore they don't do melacha while the candles are lit. The Beit Yosef then discusses the next point in the Tur, where the Tur says that if people have a custom not to do melacha, we should not allow them to do it. And the Beit Yosef analyzes, and he says, it sounds like from the Tur that this halacha from Masechet Pesachim is applicable even when there is no isur from the letter of the law, and even then we're allowed to be machmir. And the Beit Yosef says that since there's no srach isur, there's no remnant of an isur, the Beit Yosef would probably explain that in Masechet Pesachim we have an isur of doing melacha on Erev Pesach and Yudaled Nisan after Hatzot. Some places that they do it from early in the morning, they don't do melacha. It's understandable, and to have that custom, it's understandable because that day there is an isur melacha. However, since there's no isur melacha on the days of Hanukkah at all, the Beit Yosef seems to say that it's not a problem, and he's cholek on the Tur. Now that we've brought out the points in the Beit Yosef, we'll go to the Shulchan Aruch, Tav Resh Ayin Seif Aleph. Maran says that on Kafei Kislev, the days of Hanukkah begin, and it's asur and hesped and ta'anit. However, melacha is allowed, and Maran brings that the women don't do melacha when the candles are lit. He says, Yesh mi she'omer she'en lehakel lahem. What is not brought in the Shulchan Aruch is that there's a custom not to do melacha, and it clearly does not bring what the Tur says, that you shouldn't be lenient on them. So clearly we see Maran is cholek on the tour. We will discuss Be'ezrat Hashem in this series what happens when the Beit Yosef discusses something and it's not brought in the Shulchan Aruch. So there's a few different options. What could have happened, right? One, he agrees to the Beit Yosef and he doesn't mention it because in the Shulchan Aruch he's not going to bring every detail. You could also say that sometimes he changed his mind. And sometimes you'll see that he's maybe misupak, maybe Maran Shulchan Aruch doesn't have clear psak, and we will discuss these options. It's discussed in the Achronim very often what happened from the Beit Yosef to the Shulchan Aruch, but here it seems to be that Maran clearly does not go with the Torah on this one, and therefore he would allow melacha, maybe even for a place that the people have the custom not to do melacha. We return to the tour for discussion on are the seudot on Hanuka considered a seudat mitzvah. The tour brings the opinion of Bimir Mirotenberg, who says that there are seudot reshut because the days of Hanuka were instituted by Hachamim for Halel and Hoda'ah and not for Mishteh and Simha. The Bayit Chadash, who is on the other side of the tour, explains the difference between Hanukkah and Purim, as well as many other of the Achronim. The Beit Yosef brings the deen of the Maharam Rotenberg. He brings that also the Mordechai agrees to this. And in Shulchan Aruch, clearly Maran says that Ribui Sudot are Sudot Reshut because they were not nikva'u for Mishteh v'Simha. However, if we look at the Darkei Moshe, he brings the Maharami Prague, the Mordechai Aruch, who says that it is a day of Yom Tov because of the Hanukat Mizbeach. They bring a Midrash, they bring a Or Zarua of Midrash in Bahalotecha, and they also bring the words of Rashi and possibly Lashon of the Rambam. We're going to see that obviously that Maran and the Beit Yosef usually follows the psakim of the Rambam. However, here he does not bring the Rambam. Nevertheless, some of the Aharonim do say that the Rambam mentions Mishteh, and that would seem to be not like Shulchan Aruch, Ayin Ba'Aharonim that discuss this concept. The Darkei Moshe also brings the Ran in Perek Bamei Batikin that because there was a miracle of the daughter of Yohanan Kohen Gadol that fed dairy products or cheese to the Rosh Oivim, and therefore she was able to kill him. Therefore, Nahagu le'echol gvina. And in the Ramah, here in Tafresh Ayin, he brings exactly what he brought in the Darkei Moshe. He says there are opinions that hold, and he says Bilashon v'yesh omrim because it's obviously cholek on Maran. Maran says that they're not days of Mishteh v'Simcha. There are opinions that say that they are, because on the days of the Hanukat Mizbeach. And he brings a concept that we find here in the Darkei Moshe, we find in other places, that when we have a Seudat Reshut, in order to make it a Seudat Mitzvah, it's important to sing, to say Tishbachot, some say Divrei Torah, and that way, L'Kula Alma, it becomes a Seudat Mitzvah. The Mishnah Berurah discusses a little bit here and other places what's the difference between a Mishteh Reshut and Mishteh Seudat Mitzvah. The Ramah continues and he also brings the Minhag from the Ran to eat Gvina, Zecher Hanes. Here we have to understand that since the Beit Yosef didn't bring it and Maran didn't bring it, obviously it doesn't sound like Maran holds of it. However, it's brought in the Rishonim, and it's brought in the Ramah as well. There's much discussion. The Sfaradim generally, hold of the Psakim of the Shulchan Aruch. They say Kiblu Da'at Maran. However, Lo Kiblu Da'at Ramah. However, if there's dinim in the Rishonim, and there's no machloket, and there's no Maran doesn't discuss it, many times the Sfaradi Achronim will go along with it. We now return to the tour. The tour mentions Hilchot Avelut on Hanukkah, and he says, "En masvidim b'hem ela lehacham befanav," which is only if unfortunately a Tamid Hacham passes away, At the hesped, at the funeral, we're allowed to make hespedim only for him. But for other people, there are no hespedim on Hanukkah. And he brings also about Tzidukadin, is discussed in the Torah. The Bet Yosef says that there's always a Sudat Havra'ah, the Sudah after the burial. According to all opinions, they do it on Chanukah. And the Darkei Moshe brings other tzionim for the laws of Avelut. Maran ends in Siv Gimel and says, "En mispidim behem ela lehacham befanav," just like the Torah. The Ramah here brings about, what about fast days for one's parents on the Yortzeit day, and a Ta'anit Chalom. He sends you off to Hilchot Ta'anit. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we will continue with the next Siman, Taf Resh Ayin Aleph, in the next session. Have a wonderful day.